story now. President Bola Tinubu has ordered the immediate suspension of the newly introduced cashless toll system at Nigeria's major airports following widespread complaints from passengers and motorists. The system introduced by the Federal Airports Authority of Nigeria was designed to modernize toll collection, reduce cash handling and block revenue leakages. But its rollout over the weekend quickly ran into trouble. At the Lagos and Abuja international airports, we reported long queues formed at toll gates as drivers struggled to obtain prepaid access cards required under the new system. The situation then triggered massive traffic gridlock, with reports that some passengers missed their flights because they could not access the terminals on time. And following that public backlash, the Minister of Aviation and Aerospace Development, Festus Keyamo, says the president has now directed that the policy be suspended pending a comprehensive review. Government is saying it still intends to pursue automation and cashless payment systems, but will now work with the private sector to develop a more efficient and user-friendly model before reintroducing the policy. However, the episode raises broader questions about policy planning, issues of public communication, and even implementation capacity in Nigeria's aviation sector. Was the policy properly thought through before rollout? Why was there no transition period for airport users? And perhaps most importantly, why did it take presidential intervention to suspend a policy introduced by an agency under the Aviation Ministry? Let's talk to Chibuke Eloka, who's an aviation expert. Mr. Eloka, thanks for joining us. I'd like us to begin with the rollout itself. Cashless tolling is not unusual globally, but the implementation here immediately caused traffic chaos and delays. From an aviation operations perspective, what really went wrong?
Okay, thank you for me. I believe you can hear me clearly.
Yes, I can. Please go ahead.
Okay, well, talking from the aviation perspective, um, uh, just like you cited, it's a global best practices, to reduce the exposure to cash and the personnel, because we've had situations where a lot of thousand situations have been reported are across the government-controlled airports in the country, and also the revenue leakage, which has become a nightmare to the administration, considering the importance of aviation. It's a good policy going by that. But just like you cited, I think the transition period was very short. Um, it was not well thought out. It was not planned. It was a good policy. We all supported it, but you know, the transition period was very short. It was short notice. It was more like something that has to do with force majeure, which a lot of people could not cope with. I think it has been a kind of a nightmare to a lot of airline operators in the country. It's something that is supposed to be a welcome development that will be able to aid the operator. Unfortunately, we've seen this good policy turn out to be a nightmare, probably because there was no enough collaboration with stakeholders to really deliberate on this and see how we can, move on phased implementation of this. And I think that's what led to the spiral that we're seeing and that led to the suspension. It was Minister of Aviation, Festus Keyamo, all due respect, is trying to see with his team on how they can be able to sustain this thing, how any hitches here and there. So for him, he needed to, go through the hitches, see what results he can get out and move on with it. But the president's intervention doesn't mean that he rejects the policy. It doesn't actually mean that he does not support the aviation minister or what the policies they are doing, but rather it calls for, a more lesser approach to it, which the team, I believe, will go back, sit down, see the angles where probably they didn't get it 100% right, and see what to be fixed and come back with it.
A reform like this typically involves pilot testing, public awareness campaigns, and, like you said, phased implementation. Do we know if those steps were taken before this policy went live?
Well, it wasn't much. The window was very short. The window was very, very short. It was more like a situation whereby someone woke up, thought about this thing, a good policy. But our policies does not all, start with being good. Doesn't mean that when it's good on paper, when it's good when analyzed, it means it will be good when implementing. All the areas must definitely be addressed to be sure that you have a hitch-free transition. So I believe that the implementation schedule was very short. It was more like something that has to. I can't qualify it to be my own view anyway. I can qualify. It's something I'll qualify as being too sudden, whereby the whole stakeholders to be able to contribute their own quotas.
You know that airports are extremely time-sensitive environments where minutes can determine whether a passenger catches a flight or misses it. I'm wondering what you think we have to do differently.
Yeah.
Now, from the top of my head, I'm thinking of a contact card where we can introduce some discounted rates and then phase it over time, and then possibly people will, choose that as an economically viable option over paying in cash. But what do you see? What lessons do you think that the ministry or the aviation authorities must take from this episode?
Okay. First of all, we have to start with this popular notion that we all know. Nigerian travelers, the aviation in Nigeria is not well vast. It is not well stressed. A lot of Nigerian travelers, I would say 70% of them, do not come to the airports early. This is actually the angle where we have to start from. And that is the reason why you probably see someone who has a kind of a flight to depart around 2 o'clock p.m. And one of the flights, the operators I know, when you're booking your ticket, it tells you that you should be at the check-in counter 45 to 40 minutes before your flight time. Some do 1 hour. And the pressure of all those people leaving home very late and all coming to the airport access gate all at the same time also contributed to all of those things. So a lot of sensitization has to go on out there by fan. A lot of passengers needs to be sensitized on what it means that if you're planning, just like you said, a minute can be a whole lot of disastrous. And when someone who has a flight is looking at their time, they have a whole lot of things scheduled for that day. They are not considering the flight time. So a lot of sensitization need to go on the travelers on their part. That when you have a flight around 2, you don't have to get to 1 p.m., 1:30 before you start racing to the airport, because this put a whole lot of stress on the guys that are in charge. Even if you have a contact card, and if the contact card is not automated, it's not automatic, you definitely need a minute or 2 minutes to be able to slide your card to get access to the gate. And if let's assume that 200 people are passing through where it is estimated for 50 persons to pass at a time, it's a crisis, it's a chaos. You understand? So these are the sensitization that I believe that FAN needs to push out. We have a kind of a situation in the country where travelers don't come to airport on time. It is one serious issue that has hindered this cashless policy, not basically from the angle of a fan. They might have gotten a lot of things correctly, but the sensitization approach, is a factor that we all has not considered, and we really, really need to look into it, because if you look at everything that is happening, it's conjunction. You see 200 people trying to gain access to the airport access gate at once and trying to tell you that they have their flights in the next 30 minutes, in the next 20 minutes. What happened in the next past hour? Why were you not here 2 hours ago? The operators do face these things also, not just at the fan access gate there. You've had a situation whereby an airline has scheduled a flight to depart around 3 p.m. And as at 2 p.m., 1 p.m., the counters are empty. You don't have anybody around to check in. But immediately it is 50 to 45 minutes to 3 p.m. when the flight is meant to depart. You see a whole lot of people scrambling to check in. And these are the things that we need, not just on the part of FAN. This actually has exposed, the underbelly in the aviation sector that we need to push out a lot of sensitization. It's about education and sensitization on the part of the passengers to also play a role. They have a lot of enormous role to play in this, not just the stakeholders, not just the ministry, not just the operators or anybody around the airport, but the passengers. Actually, they also have a whole lot of role to play in this to help this grow and be a success. Yeah.
So, in the midst of all of the challenges, the president virtually ordered the suspension, but the policy was introduced by FAN under the aviation industry. What do you make of
Yeah.
decisions like this, requiring presidential intervention? Does it suggest some form of weaknesses in institutional decision making when policies don't match the reality on the ground?
Well, no. I'll beg to differ from that. The president is the father of the nation. FAN is a kind of a wing of the ministry. and the president oversees the ministry through the minister. So probably he definitely must have been briefed about this policy, and he supported it. But the effect has actually gone so loud, and a lot of people have been calling, a lot of people have been complaining. Of being the president, that everything stops at his table. The boss stops at his work. He needs to act, and there is nothing wrong in his decision and in his action. It does not, signal a sign of weakness on any part of it. Nah, he just acted like a father who understands the responsibility, the enormous responsibility, that lies with.
We probably lost touch with the aviation expert, Chibioka Eloka. I was actually talking about weakness on the part of institutions, an agency within the ministry that has tested this policy on the ground before the president's intervention. But I'd like us to quickly touch on some very important issues as regards the cashless system itself. You mentioned that we established earlier that this is meant to improve revenue collection and block leakages. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Perhaps the challenge came with the implementation of it. But let's talk about the legitimacy of this concern and how automation can realistically solve the long-standing issue of revenue losses at our airports. All right, we'll get back to connecting with Mr. Eloka in the course of this conversation. Finally, government now has taken a decision, and if the plans are to be reintroduced after a review, there's expectation that a proper designed and phased cashless toll system will now come on the table in a way that reflects modernization and doesn't affect the passengers' convenience in any way. We're following this story very closely, monitoring developments in that sector, and also following what decisions are going to be taken in the coming days. That's where we leave it tonight, and beyond the headlines from the unfolding political drama in Kano and now to developments in the aviation industry. One thing is certain: the need for accountability, thoughtful leadership, and policies that truly serve the public. Thanks for watching, everyone. I am Nifemi Oguntoye.